Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here. And today, finally, after selling this ship, good lord, almost 4 years ago, I'm finally back in the Tier 8 Techline American battleship, the North Carolina. This is a ship that, like I talked about a little bit in yesterday's video talking about the Colorado, is such a step up over the Colorado, especially after having grinded through the Colorado in full before I even had premium time on my account almost 5 years ago. This was such a breath of fresh air and such a sweet little ship after dealing with that. And this truly does change everything in terms of the tech line, because you go from being the slowest kid on the block to, well, we used to be one of the faster kids on the block, but boy, has that changed in the game since the North Carolina was introduced all those years ago with the American battleship tech line. Well, I say introduced, it was one of the first tech lines in the game. So yes, it's very interesting looking back at this ship and the game that this ship was launched with versus the game that we have now. Now, also, historically speaking, too, the North Carolina class was a game changer for the United States and was a huge change from going from the standard type of battleships to a new battleship class entirely, a fast battleship, versus the slow dreadnoughts that America had built for years. Now, of course, the North Carolina, there's also some really interesting history around the design of the class. Because, of course, it's the 1930s, the U.S. Navy is looking to build a new battleship, but they're limited pretty severely by a bout of international treaties, namely the Washington Naval Treaty and the London Naval Treaties. All capital ships are capped at a tonnage of 35,000 long tons that, of course, all the signatures are supposed to follow. So when you're trying to build a capital ship and a battleship that's coated in armor and armed with large caliber guns, it's kind of difficult to get a good combination of protection and firepower. Well, and plus, too, they're also limited to 14-inch guns as well. But, of course, you might be thinking, Sea Lord, this ship has 16-inch guns. We're getting there. We're getting there. So the Navy was tossing around the idea of having, well, maybe a 30-knot ship armed with 14-inch guns, but yeah, could you really balance that with enough machinery to make it go that fast, along with having good armor and, of course, fitting the 14-inch guns, which are also incredibly heavy, onto the ship? So then they toned it down to a 27-knot design with 12 14-inch guns in quad turrets. Now, where might we have seen this before in the game? But anyway, so with that design in hand, and believe it or not, and if you don't get it, the ship I'm referring to is the Florida. The Florida, the Tier 7 Premium American battleship, is one of the proto North Carolina designs. It's actually well, I say a proto design because that is the design they were going with some alterations. I believe it was the 7C design. There was I think 55 or 53 designs that were being tossed up at this time. So they did actually go with what is the Florida in game, but they tweaked it a little bit. The superstructure and some of the other placements of some of the other machinery parts and such were tweaked. But then, thanks to the London Navy Treaty, London Naval Treaty, that's the proper name of it, there was an escalator clause where if one of the signatures of the Washington Naval Treaty didn't agree to the 14-inch gun limit, then the other nations could start to install 16-inch guns onto their ships. Well, Japan in the 30s was, let's say, toying with the idea of a gun that was a little bit bigger than a 14-inch gun and rejected that. So under the escalator clause, the other signatures could up their designs to 16-inch. And despite be given permission to do so through the naval treaty, Roosevelt was very hesitant to do that, but eventually it did go forward, and we got the North Carolina ships, the North Carolina and the Washington. So with being armed with 16-inch guns now, the ships went into service and both participated quite a bit in the Second World War, particularly in the Pacific, being at battles such as the Philippine Sea, Guadalcanal, Washington 1v1ing well, not really 1v1ing, but Washington and North Carolina both double teaming the Hiroshima later in the war. So yes, both ships saw a very, very long service life throughout the war. And thankfully today the North Carolina is preserved as a museum ship, one that I'm hoping I'll be able to get to this summer. Now, in game, what does this ship feel like, and how has she aged over the years? Well, boy, the game's changed a lot since the launch, of course, and we've got so many new and wonky things at Tier 8 and above that the ship has to contend with. And quite honestly, she performs pretty impressively with a lot of what she has to deal with today. And it's, again, so interesting looking back at these older ships, how these ships were very well designed back in the day, and they still hold up today. I mentioned that with the Otago and several other older premiums of Techlines that we've been taking a look back at through the past couple of weeks. But anyway, the ship in game, let's go over her stats real quick. Her armor. So she is coated in 32 millimeters of armor, thankfully. So she has a 32 millimeter bow. Her upper armor is 32. Her stern is 32 as well. No wraparound icebreaker or stern icebreaker bows or icebreaker sterns here. Her aft and bow decks are 32 as well. The mid deck is 38. And if you come down here, her main belt is 305 millimeters. If you drop down below the waterline, that is the tip of the Citadel at 165 millimeters thick. Then below that, you have her torpedo protection. So unlike the Iowa, you don't have that nice torpedo protection bulge that comes up and wraps around the Citadel. So when we strip away the rest of her armor, you see that her Citadel is exposed but underwater. So, like I mentioned with the torpedo belt, that not covering it does lend to this ship getting blasted quite a lot when she shows broadside, which you should never do in this thing if you can help it. Now, you might be thinking, it's just the torpedo protection. Does it really help out that much? Well, it's essentially another 32 millimeters of armor, and it is pretty much spaced armor with the way that torpedo bulges work. And if you don't know how they work, torpedo bulges in real life, or these voids in the ship's armor that are meant to take the impact of torpedoes. They're just voids in the ship's armor scheme. So you have a layer of armor around it that the torpedo hits. The torpedo doesn't hit the main belt of the ship. That takes the impact of the torpedo and prevents the ship's bulkheads from being damaged. Now, in game, that they are, again, just empty voids, so it's essentially acting like spaced armor. If anything, you could just add 32 millimeters to the belt, which in the Iowa's case would give it like a 330 millimeter belt over the 302 millimeter belt of the North Carolina. So essentially, it is exposed. You will be eating citadels quite a lot if you do slip up and show broadside, which is something that you see a lot of North Carolina players doing, and I tend to attribute that to the North Carolina being, of course, the Tier 8 in the American battleship line, and playing on the North American server. You obviously have a lot of players from the United States, and they want to go up the U.S. battleship line first, and of course, since they're newer players, they don't really know, but the North Carolina is a very quick teacher, and that is what this ship teaches you going up the American battleship line, is to not show broadsides, because the Iowa and the Montana, while they have better armored citadels, there's still some of the easier Tier 9s and Tier 10s to Citadel there. However, even given that weakness, this can be a very tough ship if you know how to angle. A lot of the issues that I see with North Carolina players could be fixed by them simply forgetting they have a third turret, which you can do in the North Carolina, because the front two turrets are plenty enough in most situations to get by. Alright, so speaking about her survivability, she has 66,000 hit points when you have the B-hull equipped. She has a 19% torpedo damage reduction. Her artillery, she has some really, really sweet guns. So, like we mentioned, talking about the historical part of the ship, she is armed with 9 16-inch guns and 3 turrets, 3 guns per turret. They have a base reload time of 30 seconds, a 180 time of 36 seconds, with my commander build that I have, which I'll throw back up here. Maximum dispersion of 330 meters at 27 kilometers. The HE has a 36% chance of causing a fire on the target. The HE can also pin 68 millimeters of armor, and the HE comes out the tubes at 820 meters a second. The AP does a maximum damage of 13,100 and comes absolutely just power walking out the tubes at 701 meters a second. Now, like you might have heard me when I talked about the Kearsarge, saying that Kearsarge has North Carolina's guns. She does, because these are a 45 caliber gun, same as you'll find with the Kearsarge. And since it's a 45 caliber, which in naval artillery terminology refers to the length of the barrel. Since the barrel is shorter, and not like the 50 caliber barrels of the Iowa class, the AP comes out the tubes quite slow, because this is the American Super Heavy Mark VIII shell. So it's a heavy shell. It's coming out the tubes very slow at 701, almost 600 meters, almost in the 600 meters a second range. So, yeah, aiming at range is a little rough in this ship. It's not exceptionally painful. Not more so than other American ships. It is a bit slower, but I mean, with the special American module, the Artillery Plotting Room Model 1 model on, you do have a 27 kilometer range, which can be useful in Tier 8 and above games, thanks to, well, the way that matches are now. You basically have all the range you need with these guns with that module on, and you can't fit the normal artillery, not the Artillery Plotting Room, the aiming systems model on the ship, because I thought that's not an option, because it's an American battleship. But you do have 2.0 Sigma on these guns at Tier 8, so that does help out a lot. And you get American battleship dispersion on top of that as well. So while, yes, the shells are slow, yes, it's difficult to aim at range, this is one of the better American battleships to have because of that 2.0 Sigma. But yeah, I wouldn't play it at a 20 kilometer plus range. The range is there in those situations where you just need to be able to reach out and smack somebody at that range, like you need to finish somebody off. But with practice, you can land your shots pretty consistently. Also, too, the guns actually have pretty good angles, a bow and a stern. It's not like anything too crazy, but given that the ship does have a weak side, you can't get that third turret into the action when you need to. However, if you are facing anything with larger guns like 17-inch and above, I would just forget you have a third turret, point your bow at them, and then use those front two turrets. AH used to be a pretty darn good AA boat, but of course with the way AA is today, there's an AA rating of 85, which is better for, again, the Techline ships in comparison, but not an AA barge, unfortunately, anymore. Maneuverability, she has a top speed of 28.9 knots with the speed flag, which is so glorious. After going through the Colorado, you finally have a ship that you can disengage with. You can get on the flanks pretty quickly as well. And she's actually fairly maneuverable too. She turns almost on a dime, especially considering she is a battleship with that, what is it, 15.2 second run of shift time, that 760 meter turning circle radius. A concealment with a full build, so the module and the commander still 12.3 kilometers on this ship. That's really darn good. Really darn good for getting on flanks. Consumable, she is equipped with the fighter, and she gets the American repair party against the American battleship repair party, so it's a bit better than others. 522 HP per second for 30.8 seconds and reloads in 76 seconds. And then you have the American damage con, which lasts for 22 seconds, which is very nice because during those 22 seconds, no fires or floods will get started on your North Carolina. So the NorCal, as I like to call her, this ship has aged surprisingly well. Being a Tier 8 battleship with a 27 kilometer range, which is a bit egregious, but I mean, again, in today's matches, you actually do need it sometimes. I remember talking about the ship back in the day, and quite a few commenters were asking me, why do you keep that on your ship? 27 kilometer range is a little nuts. Well, boy, who knew I was just predicting the future of high-tier gameplay in this thing. But I mean, the guns of this thing are so good. It's still American 16-inch AP. It is slow, but that's also pretty darn good for dealing with cruisers, because it's traveling so slow, you'll overpin cruisers less often than you would in something with like a fast AP, like the Soyuz, because that thing is going to go whoop, straight through cruisers' armors because of how fast that those AP shells are going. But the American ones are going so slow, they'll actually arm on the cruiser's armor. So she's very good at just Thanos snapping broadside cruisers that aren't paying attention. And again, that's something that the Iowa and the Montana are also good at as well. And she's, again, quite stealthy with that 12.3 kilometer detection range, and with her speed, you're able to get on the flank, get in some broadside shots at the enemy team, and also turn her out and run as well. Now, of course, like I've mentioned with the armor, she is, of course, less well armored than other Tier 8 battleships. Well, there are some that aren't as good, if we're talking about like the Vanguard and Monarch and such. But she is, of course, notoriously easy to citadel. Again, if you just pay attention and don't show your broadside. And again, you have a very maneuverable battleship here that's very good at not showing her broadside when she doesn't want to. It's just paying attention to your map, having good map awareness, having good situational awareness, and you can sneak that third turret in quite often if you need to. But again, with 2.0 Sigma and American Battleship Dispersion, from medium to close range, the front two turrets are really all you need. And don't be afraid to load HE in this thing either, because you do have 6-inch guns at Tier 8, which is pretty good, but there's going to be plenty of situations where you're stuck bow into some other high-tier battleship and you have to load HE. The HE is pretty decent. I've never really had problems with it. It's not like a Lion or anything like that. You're not going to be spamming HE all the time. And of course, with that wonderful American AP, you wouldn't want to spam HE all the time as well. And also with the shell arcs on this thing. The shell arcs on this thing are very, very American, let's say. You can pull some pretty crazy shots, lob those shells over the islands at cruisers that think that they're safe, at battleships that think that they're safe too, and surprise, here's some American super heavy AP. So this ship is a joy. I'm glad I finally got around to getting her back. I've just been not really procrastinating, but I guess just too busy and occupied with newer ships coming out that I never got around to buying her back. I sold her so I could have enough credits to get the Iowa, because the Iowa was what I wanted back in the day. But this is a really sweet ship, a ship that has aged fantastically well, and a ship that I would say most of you will probably have a good time in. Again, just watch your sides, pay attention, have good map and situational awareness, and you'll do great in this ship. So guys, hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure to drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. One way to 40,000 subs, and I cannot thank you guys enough for that. Hope you're all having a wonderful Wednesday. Have a wonderful week. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.